What is the most bullshit reason for a teacher to give you a bad grade? Because he didn't read my paper. It was a university class where a TA was responsible for grading the papers. He was clearly overwhelmed and just reading introductions and grading based on them alone. I had a 2-part introduction that fully addressed the prompt, but as he only read the first part, one got my paper back with a big C at the top. I ended up getting full credit after I challenged the initial grade. Glad you had a better result. My first large college paper for a pre-Civil War history class freshman year came back with a giant red D written on it with practically no feedback. I was in a writing program and I had always excelled at essays, so I was sort of shocked. Went to the professor and asked him about the grade and lack of instruction. He sighed, looked down and said, "Westhoff, I don't like you." He went on and on after that with some bullshit reasons, but apparently the big issue came from the first week of class. He was talking about manifest destiny and said something like, "Now you have to remember, back in those days there were 50 to 100 miles between towns out in the western USA. And I raised my hand and said that there was still 50 to 100 miles between towns in the western US. He said I was exaggerating, and I told him I wasn't, because that's where I grew up. That paper was 40% of our grade. He refused to change the grade or even reread it. I scraped a C+ in that class, and I was so fucking proud of that grade, even though it was the worst grade I received in my life. At the end of the semester, I decided to ask him for his grading documentation to see if I could challenge the paper with the school, but he claimed he had already thrown it away. I found out later that was bullshit too, but I didn't press any further. Wrote in Chicago format and lost points. The assignment instructions said to write in Chicago format. Edit. To anyone curious, I did try and point this out. Basically still lost points, but they upped the final grade. Extra edit. Lot of questions on Chicago. Here's a brief overview. It's common in social studies/history courses in my experience. Basically, when thinking Chicago, think O. The footnote 1. We had weekly spelling tests in my 11th grade English class, which I thought was a bit remedial by that point, and probably said so in a not completely diplomatic way. The teacher even made you write any words you got wrong 5 times and hand that into her by the end of the class. I would typically get perfect scores on them, but one time I got a test back with no actual errors, marked as a 0%. My teacher's explanation was she saw me talking to someone in our free period before class who ended up doing poorly, and that was my fault because I distracted them from possibly studying. I was taking a 1-week online class. In the syllabus, the teacher said you must post 6 times throughout the week. So, I posted 6x on Monday, 1x on Wednesday, and felt I was good to go. I get my grade/teacher comments and the teacher wrote KNO 905. You had some good posts early in the week, but then you stopped posting, so I had to mark you down. I was annoyed by this, but then realized it was the last online course in the program and frankly I didn't care. I still graduated, and that certificate is proudly sitting in my junk drawer for all to see. I did a presentation in biology. The teacher told me she wanted me to do a creative introduction instead of just opening it with the standard "today I'll be presenting." So I did. I invented a short story about an old lady going to the supermarket and worked in some early symptoms of Alzheimer's, the topic I was presenting. I was so invested in that character. She had a name and a backstory. I even drew up a few comic panels so that everyone could follow along easily. Then at the end of my presentation I asked my class which symptoms the old lady in the story had, and hence what stage her Alzheimer's was. I get my grade back, and the teacher deducted points for the intro, since she told me to do a creative intro, so it wasn't an original idea. Like what the hell? I came up with the story, I drew the comic panels, all of that was me. I felt so betrayed. If I hadn't done a creative intro she would have deducted points, so I did one, and she deducted points anyway. And after all that work, still grinds my gears. I was 15 at the time. She gave me a 0 because she didn't think I read the book. She said I would have gotten a 75% if she thought I redid 75% of the test questions right. Supposedly means I didn't actually do the reading. Still one of those things that pisses me off even 10 years later. In the 90s my family didn't have a computer and I had no access to one. I spent a lot of time on a handwritten assignment for school and the teacher gave me a B. Writing as a comment. I would have given you an A if you had typed it up on a computer. I'm still bitter. My friend failed French because she had a French accent and the teacher couldn't understand her French because she was American. My friend had spoke French since she was 4. I was accused of plagiarism because I had an above average vocabulary. I got a grade in the end, but I was ticked. It was a group project where nobody did anything. I had to do the whole thing and turn it into a teacher who usually works with the special needs kids. She didn't think preemptive strike was a term an 8th grader should know, so obviously it was plagiarized. Not me, but a 7-year-old student I coached for a public speaking contest. She is a child prodigy, a self-taught fluent English speaker in a country where very few people speak good English. She also has a natural sense of how to structure a speech and gives all her speeches impromptu instead of memorizing. After she finished her speech, the first response from the judges was, "Do you think you speak better English than us?" Spoiler alert, she does. I spoke to them and none of them were truly fluent. They then gave her the second lowest grade possible. She got a bad grade for being better than the person grading her. I got 10/10ths on a test, but my teacher took points away from me because she didn't want my classmates to be jealous of my grade. This was English class in a Dutch school, so English is a requirement. I was the only native English speaker in my class and this was a course for adults only. 4th grade, the day before Thanksgiving break. There was no work to be done, of course, so we had a busy work art assignment. We were all handed graph paper and told to color each of the squares either yellow, orange, red, or brown. And once we finished, we were supposed to cut out corn shapes to make Indian corn decorations. I already thought this WAA stupid, and filling in all the squares was tedious. So I traced the corn shape on the graph paper and only filled in the squares that would end up as part of the final product. This meant my decorations looked the same as all the others, but I didn't waste time filling in squares that would just get cut away. When the teacher saw what I had done, she gave me a 50 for skipping work. A spelling test, not graded by the teacher, but by the kid next to us. Kid named Anthony decided all my words that had letters U and E were switched and marked pretty much every word wrong. They weren't. Like, this was probably in 3rd grade, so my handwriting was chicken scratch, but that was really stupid to me. I was upset since it was the first time I failed something in school. When I was 16, in the middle of doing my GCSEs, my dad got into a serious car accident. He was in intensive care for about 2 months. During that time, we were told that he would probably not survive. Thankfully, he pulled through. But in the meantime, I hadn't been doing any coursework or going to school. This happened in January. My exams were in May/June. I managed to do enough revision to pass my exams, but I never managed to finish my coursework for art class. The quality of my work was worth an A, but I hadn't done enough of it. I applied for mitigating circumstances, meaning that if granted, my work could have been marked on quality rather than quantity. But for whatever reason, the school refused, so I ended up getting a bad grade. That was 10 years ago, and I'm still angry about it. I've got dysgraphia, which is basically a medical reason for absolutely shitty handwriting. I got a special allowance to use a device, I forget what it was called, that was basically a digital typewriter. It amounted to a keyboard with a simple B/W LCD screen. You could hook it to a computer or printer to easily print stuff off it. It didn't have internet or even a calculator. It only functioned to type. One teacher wouldn't let me use it, despite her legally not being able to do that. Little 6th grade me didn't know she was literally breaking the law, and went with it. We had a test, and I got marked down for poor penmanship. My mom asked me why I didn't use my typing device, and I told her the teacher wouldn't allow it. She raised hell. She fucking destroyed that teacher, and for the rest of the year, despite my teacher's objections, I was allowed to use my device anytime I wanted. Edit. Dysgraphia to dysgraphia. Spell check thinks both are wrong, but the second one is correct. I failed a lit exam in college because I answered a question too well. We were supposed to write an essay comparing and contrasting one of the books that we read that semester to a modern concept or ideal. We had known about this particular question for weeks, so we had had plenty of time to prepare. Apparently it's possible to be too correct, because the response I got was that, though it is clear I did not plagiarize, none of my thoughts were original, and matched too closely with the author's interpretation of the work. I was the only person in the class to not only fail, but to get less than a B. I got no other bad marks on the rest of the exam either. He failed me, based on just that one part. I got a F the first semester in chemistry, and I was really pushing myself to get a better grade for the next semester. Needed a good grade to study what I wanted. Then we heard that another teacher from another school would make the test, but the teachers in our classes would grade it. So I have been doing all in my power, read everything, written summaries, did the math, watched documentaries etc. And I get the final grade, D, and I was very happy with that. Then my teacher takes me aside and tells me that I actually got a way better grade, C, could pass as a B, but if he gave me a C it would look bad for him, since I got a F on his test the semester before. So I was pretty pissed after that, but he left before I could say anything. It was my last day of school as well. I already posted here, but I have another story. Had a high school French teacher who failed me on a written test for using pencil. He claimed his eyes only saw pen. My family was outraged and called the dean. The dean was like, oh well, he's getting them ready for standardized tests. My entire family had master's degrees plus, and were like, what standardized test is in pen? It's always pencil. This is a school. Years later I have my doctorate. And not one goddamn test ever was pen only, standardized or otherwise. My paper didn't make her feel happy. It was an analytical writing course designed to teach how to write a thesis. The teacher was one of these super hippie artsy people, and most of the curriculum involved just reading articles she failed to get published. So we had to do this analytical discourse on someone's work, and it was trash. So I picked it apart. I got a F. I went to her saying WTF. I followed the rubric to the T. Her response, so well, the paper was good and all, but it didn't make me happy. It was kind of mean, and I don't like mean. I was like, the assignment was to find flaws in the paper. It had countless. She replied yes, but it didn't make me happy. You get a ref. I went to the chair, and it turns out her father was on the board of directors, and she had sued the school several times. So she was bulletproof and got to do whatever the hell she wanted. I took a low level, the lowest possible level, modern literature course in college. The prof was apparently someone people knew. They had us read Dracula. Specifically a copy of Dracula they had edited, or something. I don't remember exactly what their contribution to the specific edition was, but their name was on the copy of a book originally published more than 100 years prior. The prof accept no original thought, or even really unoriginal thoughts, unless they were cribbed directly from them. I made the very basic connection between Dracula and the serpent in the garden. There's a passage in the book that straight up makes this comparison. If I remember right, it was dismissed as unfounded, because that's not what the prof had talked about in class. The prof just wanted us to parrot back what he said in class on the test essays. It was a surprise to me that there was more creativity in some of my low-level engineering courses than there were in low-level literature courses. I lost 2 points out of 10 on an assignment, because a full mark means perfection and only God is perfect, and -1 point is only for instructors and professors. Each point mattered at the time, because a full scholarship was on the line depending on our grades through the semester. Edit. Just to clarify, I lost 2 points out of 10, which actually is 2% of the whole grade. This was in the UAE. I lost several more grades in similar assignments. In one of them, It was questions from a paragraph, so once I asked him and went through the answer step by step logically, he got defensive, accused me of wronging him and that he grades arbitrarily, and left the class. I lost 3 more points after that, lol. I lost the A grade even before the final, and thus lost my chance at the scholarship. Nobody in the administration cared. I still resent him to this day. For the final submission of my graphic design college qualification, the brief was to design branding for a pub/club. I got a B because my concept was too cool. The sheer mind-fucking bullshit of that actually knocked me so hard that I didn't even bother pursuing it as a career beyond the course. I thought my design teacher had it in for me, as he kept giving me D's for what I considered pretty good artwork. So to prove it, I had my professional graphic designer father do my homework, another D. Then I had my professional illustrator mother do it the following week. D. When we called him out, he didn't really have an excuse on why he considered professional standard design work only to be worth a D in a grade 10 project, but we enjoyed calling him out in a meeting with the head of year. Because I was homeschooled, I was getting my AA at a local community college and was getting my electives to pursue a degree in teaching. Several of our papers required us to write about our classroom experience as children. I got very poor grades on those, and when I asked the professor, she essentially said it was because I had no real classroom experience. This is not me, but a friend of mine. I go to a Catholic high school, and in my religion class we had to create a presentation around socially just situations and ethical issues. Seeing how euthanasia had just been legalized in our state of Victoria, she decided to create her presentation around that. She produced an above average presentation, and obviously produces a well-researched and thought-provoking project, but revived a poor grade on it. When she questioned the teacher about it, the teacher had the audacity to say that she disagreed with euthanasia. It's against the Catholic social teachings and the dignity of human life in the church, therefore deemed it fair to give this girl a low mark. After some complaining, she raised the mark slightly, but come on, that cannot be fair. The whole assignment was based around commenting on social issues in the community. I'm still mad for my friend, even though she's over it. She didn't like me. My marks in her class were terrible, but when given assignments to be graded by other teachers, I'd get high 90s. This raises red flags with administration, and was potentially one of the many reasons why she didn't last very long as a teacher. Also, my grades were reconsidered and adjusted to match my standardized testing scores instead of my overall assignment grades from her class. When I was in college, I had a professor walking around collecting a homework assignment that was 10% of our grade. Being the unorganized person that I am, I'm digging through my folders trying to find which one has it. She walks by me as I'm still looking and meanders toward her podium. Before she even gets to the front of the class, I find it and run up to her to hand it in. She looks me dead in the eyes and says, "That's late, you get a 0. I called her a string of horrible things. She really was. This was just the final straw. Dropped the course and took it again with an amazing prof the next semester. When I was in school, a teacher refused to accept our assignment. 2 people. He had specifically asked for it to be printed. We completed it the day before it was due and had to print it in blue because we had run out of black ink. After we got our bad grade, my friend's mom came to the school and made a scandal because she couldn't understand why we had failed, only to be told by the teacher that he hadn't even looked at the content because the ink was blue. She took it to the headmistress, who then forced him to accept the assignment because it really wasn't a valid reason. Funnily, after that I printed another assignment in red ink just to mess with him. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and comment below your stories to be part of a future video.